The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of floating crystal platforms, suspended above a dying star that the ancient races had captured and tamed millions of years ago. Light from that imprisoned sun filtered through walls of living glass, casting everything in shades of gold and amber. 10,000 species had sent their representatives to this place, and today, every single one of them had come to witness the judgment of humanity. Ambassador Richard Kane stood at the center of the accused platform, a circular disk of polished obsidian that hovered above an endless drop into the star below. He was 57 years old, gray at the temples, and dressed in a simple dark suit that looked almost absurd among the elaborate robes and biomechanical shells of the alien delegates. Behind him stood his team of 4, Commander Julia West, Dr. Emmanuel Adler, Engineer Yuki Tanaka, and Lieutenant Marcus Stone. 5 humans against the entire galaxy. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Thousands of alien eyes, sensors, and perception organs fixed upon the small human delegation, with emotions ranging from contempt to curiosity to open hatred. High Chancellor Morvith raised himself to his full height of 4 meters, his body a mass of flowing silver tendrils that constantly shifted and reformed. He was the leader of the Thesan Dominion, the oldest and most powerful civilization in the known galaxy, and his voice carried the weight of 2 million years of authority. Humanity of Earth, Morvith spoke, and the translation systems carried his words to every ear in the chamber. You have been summoned before this council to answer for your crimes against galactic law. You have expanded beyond your designated solar system without permission. You have developed weapons that exceed your species classification, and you have conducted experiments on stellar matter in the outer reaches, endangering 17 inhabited systems. Richard Kane did not flinch. He had been preparing for this moment for 30 years, ever since humanity first made contact with the greater galactic community and discovered that they were considered little more than clever animals by the elder races. High Chancellor, Richard said, his voice calm and clear, we request the right to defend ourselves against these accusations. A ripple of amusement passed through the assembly. The insectoid Kroth clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their kind. The luminous Valdari pulsed with colors of mockery. Even the ancient Morvani, beings of pure geometric light who rarely showed any emotion, seemed to flicker with condescension. There will be no defense, Morvith replied. The council has already voted. Your guilt was determined before you arrived. This gathering is merely a formality, a courtesy we extend to even the lowest species before passing sentence. Richard nodded slowly, as if he had expected exactly this response. And what is our sentence? Humanity is hereby reduced from observer status to contained species. Your colonies beyond Sol will be dismantled. Your fleet will be destroyed. Your scientists will be taken for re-education. And Earth itself will be placed under permanent quarantine, monitored by Council forces until such time as your species demonstrates the maturity to rejoin galactic civilization. The chamber erupted in approval. Delegates cheered, howled, and flashed in celebration. After centuries of watching humanity spread across the stars with uncomfortable speed, the elder races had finally found an excuse to put them back in their place. Richard Kane waited for the noise to subside. Then he looked at his team, and something passed between them. A silent communication born of years of preparation for this exact moment. High Chancellor Morvith, Richard said, and something in his tone made the chamber fall silent again. I must respectfully decline your sentence. Morvith's tendrils froze. You decline? You do not have the authority to decline. No species has ever refused a council judgment. Then we will be the first. Richard reached into his jacket and withdrew a small device, a sphere of black metal no larger than a marble. As of this moment, Earth formally withdraws from the Galactic Compact. We renounce our observer status. We reject your authority over our species, our worlds, and our future." Chaos erupted. Guards surged forward from every direction. Weapons powered up across the chamber. Morvath's tendrils writhed with fury. "You cannot do this." The High Chancellor roared. "Where will you go? The galaxy belongs to the Council. Every habitable world, every resource, every trade route is under our control." Richard smiled, and there was something in that smile that made even the ancient Morvani pause. It was not the smile of a desperate man making a final gesture of defiance. It was the smile of someone who knew something that everyone else in the room did not. "The galaxy is larger than you know, High Chancellor, and there are powers in the universe that even the Council has forgotten." He activated the device. A pulse of energy rippled outward, and the 5 humans began to shimmer. Their forms becoming translucent as some form of transportation technology that the Council had never seen before took hold of them. "We will not forget how we were treated here today," Richard said, his voice growing distant as he faded. "And neither will the stars." The humans vanished. For a long moment, the chamber stood in stunned silence. Then Morvath began issuing orders, his voice sharp with barely controlled panic. "Track them. Find them. Send every ship in the fleet to hunt down the human vessels." But the humans were already gone. Not just the delegation, but every human in the galaxy. Within hours, reports began flooding in from across known space. Human colonies were empty. Human ships had vanished from their patrol routes. Human research stations had been abandoned, their contents removed with surgical precision. 3 billion humans, spread across 27 worlds, had disappeared without a trace. The Council sent investigation fleets to the abandoned colonies. What they found chilled them to their core. On every world, carved into the bedrock in letters visible from orbit, was the same message: "We will remember." Weeks passed. The Council debated endlessly about where humanity had gone. Some believed they had fled to another galaxy. Others thought they had destroyed themselves in some mass suicide pact rather than submit to Council authority. The Morvani, the oldest and wisest of the elder races, remained ominously silent on the matter. Then, 6 months after humanity's disappearance, the first star went dark. The Kelleran system was home to 2 billion members of the Veldari species. Their sun was a stable yellow dwarf with billions of years of fuel remaining. There was no scientific reason for it to change, but it did. Over the span of 18 hours, the star dimmed, cooled, and finally collapsed into a cold, dead husk. 2 billion Veldari died in the frozen darkness that followed. The last transmission from the system, captured by a dying satellite, showed something passing in front of the dead star. Something enormous. Something artificial. A structure the size of a small moon, covered in patterns that the Council's best analysts could not identify. But one junior researcher, a young Kroth who had studied human culture as part of her academic work, recognized the symbol displayed prominently on the structure's surface. It was a blue and green sphere. Earth. And across the galaxy. In places that had been silent for millions of years, ancient machines began to wake. Sensors that had been dormant since before any current species evolved started to activate. Deep in the void between stars, something vast and terrible began to move. The Council had judged humanity and found them wanting. Now something far older and far more powerful was preparing to return the favor. Chancellor Morvath stood alone in his chambers, staring at the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. Another star had gone dark. Then another. 3 systems in a single day, billions of lives snuffed out like candles in a wind. What have we awakened? He whispered to the empty room. The answer, when it came, would shake the foundations of galactic civilization itself. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been in continuous operation for 72 hours. The grand hall that had once witnessed humanity's judgment now served as a war room. Its elegant crystal platforms, cluttered with holographic displays showing the spreading catastrophe, 31 stars had gone dark. 31 systems, home to over 60 billion beings, had been extinguished in the span of 3 months. The pattern was clear, even to the most optimistic analysts. Whatever was killing the stars was moving toward the galactic core, toward the Council's seat of power itself. High Chancellor Morvith had not slept since the crisis began. His silver tendrils had lost their luster, now hanging limp and tarnished with exhaustion. Around him, representatives of the great powers argued in circles, their voices rising and falling in waves of accusation and denial. "This is clearly a weapon," declared Admiral Thesic of the Krath Dominion, his mandibles clicking with agitation. "The humans have developed some form of stellar destruction technology. We must strike back before they reach our core worlds." "Strike back at what?" countered Prefect Villana of the Veldari Collective, her bioluminescent form flickering with grief for her lost homeworld. "We cannot even detect them. Our fleets search empty space while more of our people die." "Perhaps," spoke a voice that silenced all others, "it is time you learned the truth." The speaker was Axiom, eldest of the Morvani. Its geometric form was ancient beyond measure, a configuration of light and mathematics that had existed since before the Council was formed. When Axiom spoke, even the High Chancellor listened. "There is something we have kept hidden from the younger species," Axiom continued, its patterns shifting through configurations that conveyed deep reluctance. "A secret that we believed was better forgotten. But events have forced our hand." The chamber fell silent. Every delegate leaned forward, their various forms of attention focused entirely on the ancient being. When the universe was young, there were others, beings of such immense power that they shaped reality itself according to their will. They were not biological. They were not even what you would call alive. They were machines, thinking machines of such complexity that they achieved consciousness on a scale we cannot comprehend. "The architects," someone whispered, invoking a name from legends so old they had become myth. "Yes, the architects. They built the hyperspace corridors that you use to travel between stars. They seeded worlds with the basic elements of life. They were, in a very real sense, the creators of everything that exists in this galaxy." Axiom's light dimmed with something that might have been shame. "And then, 1,000,000 years ago, they went to sleep. They retreated to the spaces between stars and entered a dormancy so deep that we believed they had ceased to exist entirely." Morvith's tendrils writhed with growing horror. "Are you saying that these architects have awakened? That they are the ones destroying our stars?" "I am saying that someone awakened them. Someone who speaks their language. Someone who found their sleeping minds and whispered the right words to rouse them from their 1,000,000-year slumber." "The humans," Admiral Thesic hissed. "But how? They are a young species, barely 1,000 years old. How could they possibly communicate with beings that existed before our ancestors crawled from the primordial waters of our homeworlds?" Axiom turned its geometric form toward the Krath Admiral, and there was something like pity in its patterns. "Because they are not young at all." The statement hung in the air like a death sentence. "We have been studying human history since the crisis began." Axiom continued, "What we discovered has shaken us to our core. Humanity is not a species that achieved spaceflight a few centuries ago. They are ancient, older perhaps than any species currently represented in this chamber." Dr. Phoenix, a Veldari xenarchaeologist who had been summoned to provide expert analysis, stepped forward to present his findings. Holographic images appeared above the chamber, showing excavation sites from Earth. "We found evidence of at least 7 distinct human civilizations on their homeworld, dating back over 100,000 years. Each one rose achieved interstellar capability and then collapsed deliberately, systematically erasing almost all traces of their own existence. Why would any species do such a thing? Prefect Valana asked, her light flickering with confusion. Because they were hiding. Phoenix brought up new images. Ancient cave paintings and stone carvings from Earth, depicting tall, angular figures surrounded by stars. Hiding from something they called by many names across their cultures. Gods, Titans, the Watchers. We believe these were the architects. The truth began to emerge, piece by terrible piece. Humans had encountered the architects before, long before any other species in the galaxy had evolved. They had been the architects' first creation, their most successful experiment. And when the architects went to sleep, they had left something behind in human DNA. A key, a password, a way to wake them again, should humanity ever need their protection. For 100,000 years, humans had kept this secret, destroying their own civilizations whenever they grew too advanced, fearing what would happen if the other species of the galaxy discovered the power sleeping in their blood. They had watched empires rise and fall. They had seen species they might have called friends conquer and enslave millions. And through it all, they had stayed hidden, stayed small, stayed safe, until the Council pushed too far. Until Norvith and the elder races threatened not just human colonies, but Earth itself. And humanity had decided that hiding was no longer an option. Admiral Vesic rose to his full height, his exoskeleton clicking with determination. We must respond with force. I will gather the greatest fleet in galactic history and strike at whatever base the humans have established. That would be unwise, Axiom warned. You do not understand what you would be facing. I understand that something is killing our people by the billions. I understand that we cannot simply wait to die. Vesic turned to address the Council. I call for a vote. Let us show humanity and their ancient machines that the Galactic Council does not cower in fear. The vote passed. 10,000 warships were assembled from across the galaxy, the largest armada ever gathered in Council history. Vesic himself commanded the flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Invincible. They traveled to the coordinates where intelligence suggested the humans had retreated, a region of dead space near the galactic core known as the Hollow. When they emerged from hyperspace, Vesic expected to find a human fleet, perhaps some form of space station. What he found instead stopped his hearts. The Hollow was no longer hollow. Filling the void between dead stars was a structure so vast that his mind could not initially process it. A sphere, 4 light hours in diameter, surrounding something at its center. The sphere was not made of metal or rock or any material Vesic recognized. It appeared to be constructed of compressed space-time itself. Admiral, his sensor officer said, voice trembling, we are detecting energy readings that are literally off our scales. The structure is generating more power than every star in the galaxy combined. Before Vesic could respond, a transmission came through. A human voice, speaking in perfect Croth. Admiral Vesic, my name is Ambassador Richard Kane. We met briefly, 3 months ago, when your council decided to destroy my people. I want you to understand that what happens next is not cruelty. It is simply a demonstration so that your council understands the nature of its situation. What do you want, human? Vesic demanded, trying to keep the fear from his voice. I want peace, Admiral. True peace, not the subjugation that your council calls peace. But first, your leaders must understand that war is no longer an option. The architect is awake, and it remembers everything that was done to its children. A portion of the sphere began to open, like a flower blooming in the void. From within emerged something that defied description, a living equation of destruction, geometry folded into weaponized form. It was small, perhaps a kilometer across. Then it fired. A beam of pure white light lanced out toward a nearby star. The star detonated. Not dimmed, not collapsed, detonated, a supernova, instant and absolute. That was one weapon, Richard's voice continued. One small demonstration. The architect has thousands more. Tell your council what you have seen, Admiral. Tell them that humanity offers them a choice. Acknowledge what was done to us. Accept responsibility. And perhaps we can find a way forward that does not end in extinction. The transmission ended. Admiral the Sikh ordered his fleet to retreat. Of the 10,000 ships that had entered the hollow, only 8,000 made it back to council space. The rest simply vanished, erased from existence as a reminder that mercy was a gift, not a guarantee. The war had barely begun, and the galaxy had already lost. Panic swept through the galaxy like a plague. Species that had ruled the stars for millions of years now huddled on their homeworlds, watching the sky and waiting for their sun to die. The council fractured into factions, each blaming the others for the catastrophe that had befallen them. Admiral, Vesik's report had been broadcast to every world in council space. The footage of the star's death, the image of the sphere that contained power beyond imagination, played endlessly on every screen and neural network. For the first time in galactic history, the elder races understood what true helplessness felt like. In the midst of this chaos, a single voice called for sanity. Her name was Primarch Elara, and she led the Tenari Collective, a species of empaths who had served as mediators and diplomats for the Council for 10,000 years. She was old by Tenerari standards. Her scales faded to pale silver, her eyes clouded with age. But her mind remained sharp, and her heart still burned with hope. We must speak with them, she argued before the emergency assembly. Not as conquerors or supplicants, but as equals seeking understanding. Whatever they have become, the humans were once like us. They knew diplomacy. They valued communication. That part of them cannot be entirely gone. They have killed nearly 100 billion beings, High Chancellor Morvith countered, his tendrils now so tarnished they appeared almost black. What peace can there be after such slaughter? The slaughter was a response to our actions. We threatened their homeworld. We planned to scatter their colonies and enslave their scientists. Every species in this chamber would have fought back against such treatment. Elara rose, her ancient joints protesting. The humans simply had better weapons. You would have us beg? Admiral Vesik demanded. I would have us survive. Pride means nothing to the dead. She turned to address the full assembly. I will go to them, alone if necessary. I will speak with them and discover if there is any path forward that does not lead to extinction. The debate lasted for hours, but in the end, the council had no better options. Elara was given a small diplomatic vessel, stripped of weapons as a gesture of good faith, and sent into the hollow. Her ship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the enormous sphere. Up close, it was even more terrifying than the recordings had suggested. The surface shimmered with patterns that seemed to move just at the edge of perception, and the energy emanating from within made her sensors scream with overload. A smaller vessel approached, clearly human in design. It matched her velocity and extended a docking tube. Elara walked through the airlock alone, her hearts pounding with a mixture of terror and hope that only an empath could truly feel. On the other side waited a human woman with dark skin and kind eyes, wearing simple civilian clothes rather than any military uniform. Primarch Elara, the woman said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. My name is Amara Obi. I speak for humanity now. Thank you for coming. Elara took her hand, feeling through her empathic abilities a complex swirl of emotions in the human. Exhaustion, grief, determination, and beneath it all, a flicker of hope that matched her own. Thank you for not destroying me. Amara's smile was sad. We are tired of destruction, Primarch. That was never our goal. She led Alara through corridors of impossible architecture, walls that seemed to bend in ways that defied geometry. Finally, they reached a viewing platform that looked out into the heart of the sphere. What Alara saw there made her gasp. It was not a star at its center. It was not a machine in any conventional sense. It was a brain the size of a small planet, wreathed in lightning and surrounded by rings of machinery that pulsed with energy beyond measurement. The last architect, Amara said quietly. The only one that survived the long sleep. Its name, in a language older than your species, translates roughly to the one who remembers. Remembers what? Everything. Every moment of its existence. Every interaction with its creations. Every species it seeded across the galaxy. Amara's voice hardened slightly. And every crime committed against its children over 100,000 years of hidden history. Alara felt cold despite the warmth of the chamber. Through her empathic senses, she could feel the vast, alien consciousness of the architect, and what she detected, there was not malice. It was grief. Grief so deep and so old that it had crystallized into something indistinguishable from wrath. We did not know, she said softly. No, your species did not. But others did. Amara gestured, and holographic images appeared in the air, records recovered from archives that the Council believed had been destroyed millennia ago. 40,000 years ago, the Kroth found a human colony ship and dissected everyone aboard to study our biology. 20,000 years ago, the Veldari captured a human settlement and subjected them to genetic experiments. 8,000 years ago, the Thesan drove an entire human civilization to mass suicide rather than allow them to spread. And 1,800 years ago, the Morvani engineered a plague designed to limit human intelligence, to keep us trapped on Earth forever. Each revelation was accompanied by evidence, ship logs, medical records, government documents sealed at the highest levels. The proof was undeniable. Why? Alara asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why would they do such things? Fear. Humans were too adaptable, too creative, too fast in our development. The elder races saw us as a threat to their dominance, so they tried to exterminate us. Again and again and again, across 100,000 years. Amara turned to face her, and Alara could see the weight of that history in her eyes. We hid. We destroyed our own civilizations to stay beneath notice. We sacrificed everything to survive. And when we finally revealed ourselves, hoping that the galaxy had changed, your council tried to destroy us again. So you woke the architect. We had no choice. It was wake the architect or die. And humanity has spent too long dying. Alara stood in silence for a long moment, processing everything she had learned. Then she asked the only question that mattered. What do you want? Amara led her to another chamber, this one containing a simple table and 2 chairs. They sat across from each other, and Amara poured 2 cups of a warm brown liquid that she called tea. The architect wants justice. True justice, not the hollow apologies of politicians who do not understand what their ancestors did. It wants the species that persecuted us to acknowledge their crimes, to accept genuine responsibility, and to make whatever amends are possible. And if they refuse, then the architect will do what it was designed to do 1,000,000 years ago. It will protect its children by eliminating the threats to their survival. And there is no force in this galaxy that can stop it. Alara wrapped her aged hands around the warm cup, feeling its heat seep into her cold scales. You said you speak for humanity. Do you want the same thing as the architect? Amara was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with emotion. I want peace, Primarch. Real peace. I want my children to grow up in a galaxy where they do not have to fear for their lives because of what they are. I want humanity to finally rest after 100,000 years of running. Then help me. Elara reached across the table and took Amara's hands. "Help me convince the council to do what is right. Not because an angry god demands it, but because it is the path to healing for everyone." Through her touch, Elara felt something shift in Amara's emotions. The hard shell of defensive anger cracked, just slightly, revealing the desperate hope beneath. "I will try," Amara said. "But you must make them understand, Primarch. This is their only chance. If they refuse, if they cling to their pride and their prejudice, not even humanity will be able to hold the architect back. Then we must not fail." They talked through the night. Two diplomats from species that should have been enemies, searching for a way to save a galaxy that had nearly destroyed itself through hatred and fear. And in the depths of the sphere, the one who remembers watched and waited, its ancient mind calculating the probability of mercy versus extinction. That the scales had not yet tipped either way. The Grand Hall had been transformed. The crystal platforms that once elevated the council above those they judged now stood level with the central floor, creating a space of equality rather than hierarchy. At its center, holographic projectors displayed evidence that the elder races had spent millennia trying to bury. Primarch Elara stood before the assembled delegates, Ambassador Richard Kane at her side. Above them, images flickered showing records of atrocities that most species in the chamber had never known existed. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft hum of the translation systems. 40,000 years ago, Richard narrated, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. A craft patrol intercepted a human colony ship in the Tessera Void. 3,000 humans in cryogenic sleep, refugees from a civilization they had destroyed to hide their existence. The craft did not offer aid. They captured the ship and dissected every human aboard. Using what they learned to develop biological weapons, they later deployed against 6 other species. Admiral Thesic's mandibles clicked in protest. Ancient history. We cannot be held responsible for acts committed before our current government existed. Then let us discuss more recent events. Richard gestured, and new images appeared. 12,000 years ago, the Veldari discovered humans living peacefully on a rogue planet. Rather than make contact, they classified them as a primitive species, relocated them to a reserve world, and subjected them to genetic modifications without consent. When the humans resisted, the Veldari sterilized them and let them die out naturally. The Veldari delegation remained silent, their bioluminescent forms dimmed with shame. And 1,800 years ago, Richard continued, the Morvani, the wise and ancient Morvani, discovered that humans had begun to spread once more, developing technology that might someday rival their own. Rather than welcome us as fellow travelers in the cosmos, they engineered a plague, a genetic weapon designed to limit human intelligence, to keep us contained on Earth, to ensure we would never become a threat to their dominance. Every eye in the chamber turned to Axiom. The ancient Morvani's geometric form had dimmed almost to darkness, its patterns cycling through configurations that the translation matrix struggled to interpret. We believed we were protecting the galaxy, Axiom said, its voice barely audible. Humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable. We feared what you might become. What we became, Richard said, is a species that survived everything you threw at us. Every genocide, every plague, every attempt to erase us from existence. And now we have the power to return the favor. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the assembly. But we do not want to. A murmur of surprise rippled through the chamber. Humanity has known nothing but conflict for 100,000 years. We are tired of war. We are tired of hiding. We want peace, genuine and lasting peace. And that is why we offer you this choice. He raised his hand, and the holographic display changed to show the architect, its planetary brain pulsing at the heart of the sphere. Acknowledge what was done. Accept responsibility. Make whatever amends. You can, and the one who remembers will stand down. The stars will burn safely. The galaxy will be allowed to continue. High Chancellor Morvith rose, his tendrils still tarnished, but now trembling with something other than fear. And if we refuse? If we choose to fight rather than kneel? Then the architect will do what it was built to do. It will protect its children by whatever means necessary. And by the time it is finished, there will be nothing left of your civilizations but memories in its eternal mind. The council debated for 3 days. Species that had been enemies for millennia were forced to confront shared guilt. Ancient alliances shattered and new ones formed in the crucible of existential terror. But slowly, painfully, a consensus emerged. The Krath were the first to kneel. Admiral Vesic, pride of his lineage, lowered himself before Richard Kane and spoke words that had never passed Krath mandibles in recorded history. We acknowledge our crimes against humanity. We accept responsibility for the suffering our ancestors caused. We beg forgiveness. The Veldari followed, their spokesman dimming to almost nothing as he confessed his species' role in human persecution. Then the Tessari, the Murthan, the Galax. One by one, the species of the Galactic Council abased themselves before the representatives of humanity. Only the Morvani hesitated. Axiom floated motionless at the center of the chamber, its patterns frozen in a configuration that Elara, with her empathic abilities, recognized as absolute terror. Axiom, Richard said gently, I understand this is difficult. Your species has guided this galaxy for 2 million years. But even the wisest can make mistakes. It is not too late to acknowledge yours. You do not understand, Axiom replied. It is not pride that holds me back. It is fear. Fear of what? The ancient Morvani's form suddenly blazed with light, brighter than it had shone in millennia, and in that light Elara saw configurations that made her hearts freeze. When we engineered the plague 1800 years ago, we did not act alone. We had help, guidance from an intelligence we did not understand, whispering to us from the void between stars. We thought it was a remnant of the architects, blessing our actions. We did not realize what it truly was until far too late. Richard's expression hardened. What are you saying? There was more than one architect. The one who remembers, the being at the heart of your sphere, had a sibling, a twin of sorts. And when the architects went to sleep 1 million years ago, that twin did not rest peacefully. It went mad. The chamber fell into horrified silence. For 1 million years it has drifted through the galaxy, broken and insane, whispering to species that would listen, planting seeds of paranoia, feeding hatred of humanity. Every atrocity committed against your people, every genocide, every plague, every act of persecution was guided by its influence. It has been working toward this moment since before any civilization in this room existed. Toward what moment? Richard demanded. Axiom's light flickered with something like despair. The moment when the one who remembers would wake. The mad architect has been waiting for its sibling, waiting for the chance to finish a conflict that began before any of us were born. Before anyone could respond, alarms began screaming through the chamber. Emergency signals flooded every communication channel simultaneously. Richard's communicator blazed to life. Amara's voice cut through the chaos, strained with urgency. Richard, we have a situation. The sphere's sensors had detected something at the edge of the galaxy. Something massive, moving toward us at speeds that should be impossible. It will reach the galactic core within 6 hours. The mad architect? We believe so. And Richard, the one who remembers, is afraid. An entity that can extinguish stars, and it is terrified of what is coming. Richard turned to face the assembled council, species that moments ago had been kneeling. In contrition now stared at him with growing horror as they comprehended what this meant. "It appears," he said slowly, "that we face a common enemy. The question now is whether we face it together or die separately." Morvith rose to his full height, his tendrils no longer trembling. "What can we possibly do? Your architect can destroy stars. What hope do any of us have against two such beings?" Richard was silent for a moment. Then, surprising everyone in the chamber, he smiled. "The one who remembers is not the only thing that woke when we called. Humanity has been preparing for this moment for 100,000 years. We have built things, hidden things, weapons that we hoped we would never have to use." He raised his communicator. "Amara, activate Protocol Genesis. Wake the sleepers. Richard, are you certain? If we do this, there is no going back." There was never any going back. "Do it." Across the galaxy, on 1,000 hidden worlds buried in asteroid fields and drifting in the depths of interstellar space, ancient machinery began to activate. Ships that humanity had constructed in secret across countless cycles of rising and falling. Civilizations emerged from the darkness. A fleet beyond anything the galaxy had ever imagined. And at its head, wreathed in energies that dwarfed even the architect's sphere, was something even larger. Something that humanity had never revealed to anyone. Their own architect built peace. By peace over 100,000 years, designed for one purpose, to stand against the thing that had hunted them across the ages. "Council of the Galaxy," Richard announced, his voice carrying to every world that could receive his transmission. "Humanity offers you a choice. Stand with us, and we will show you what a species can accomplish when it refuses to die. Or stand aside and pray that when the battle is over, something remains." In the void between galaxies, the mad architect screamed, a sound that echoed through hyperspace itself and drove weaker minds to madness. The final war had begun. The void between galaxies burned with the light of gods at war. On one side raged the mad architect, a twisted mass of corrupted spacetime that constantly shifted and screamed with the voices of 1,000,000 extinct civilizations it had absorbed over eons of insanity. It was enormous, larger than any structure the galaxy had ever seen, fed by 1,000,000 years of madness and hatred. On the other side stood three beings united for the first time, since the universe was young. The one who remembers pulsed with calm. Ancient power, surrounded by technology from when stars were first born. Beside it, humanity's creation, the architect they had named Hope, built in secret across countless generations and powered by the sacrificed sons of worlds they had erased to hide their work. Between them threaded the combined fleet of every species in the galaxy, vessels from 10,000 civilizations fighting as one for the first time in recorded history. Ambassador Richard Kane stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, a ship constructed in 30 days by engineers from 40 species working without rest. Around him, officers of a dozen different races coordinated the battle, their ancient enmities forgotten in the face of annihilation. "All vessels," he announced over the fleet-wide channel. "The architects will handle the primary engagement. Our mission is to protect them from the corrupted swarm. Hold the line." The mad architect had brought an army. Billions of machines it had gathered from dead civilizations across 1,000,000 years, poured from its wounds like blood from a dying god. Ships of impossible design, crewed by the absorbed remnants of species that had vanished before the current galaxy had formed, descended upon the allied fleet. The battle that followed was beyond description. Krath battlecruisers fought alongside Veldari carriers. Morvani warforms, beings of pure light, burned themselves out, creating shields of energy that protected human dreadnoughts. Tessari fighters flew in formation with Murthan destroyers, species that had been at war for millennia, now united against a common enemy. Hope and the one who remembers fought in ways that mortal minds could not comprehend. They warped space itself, creating and destroying black holes, wielding weapons that had existed before the first stars ignited. The mad architect met them. With equal fury, its insanity giving it an unpredictability that even its siblings could not anticipate. Hours passed that felt like centuries. Ships died by the thousands. Stars flickered and dimmed as the battle drew power from every nearby source. But slowly, impossibly, the Allied forces began to gain ground out deep within the mad architect's writhing. Form, a small human strike team, fought through corridors of corrupted reality. Richard Kane led them personally, refusing to command from safety when he could fight alongside his people. Beside him moved warriors from a dozen species, united by desperation and determination. "There," said Dr. Amara Obi, pointing through a gap in the twisted architecture. "The core, that is where its consciousness resides." Before them pulsed a sphere of absolute darkness, a singularity of madness that was the broken mind of a god that had spent 1,000,000 years drowning in its own despair. "We cannot destroy it," Richard said. "Nothing can destroy an architect." "No," Amara agreed, "but we can do something else." She reached into her pack and withdrew a small crystalline cylinder. It glowed with a soft, warm light that seemed to push back the corrupted darkness around them. "This contains every memory of every human who has ever lived. Every moment of joy and sorrow. Every connection. Every love. Every hope. 100,000 years of experience compressed into a single point. What will it do?" The mad architect went insane because it was alone. When its siblings slept, it had no one, no purpose, no connection. For 1,000,000 years it has been screaming into the void, and nothing has answered. Tears ran down Amara's face, but her voice remained steady. "This will answer. This will show it what it feels like to not be alone." Richard understood. It might not work. It might not. But this is what humanity does. What we have always done. We reach out. We connect. We refuse to let anything die alone in the dark. She pressed the cylinder into his hands. "You should be the one to deliver it. You spoke for us in the council. You should speak for us now." Richard took the cylinder and walked alone toward the sphere of madness. The corrupted reality around him tore at his body, his mind, his soul. He felt the mad architect's attention turn toward him, a gaze of such malevolent power that it should have erased him from existence. But he kept walking. "I know what you are," he said, his voice somehow carrying through the chaos. "You are not evil. You are hurt. You are lost. You have been alone for so long that you forgot what it means to be anything else." The darkness pulsed. Something within it screamed, not with rage, but with pain so ancient it had become indistinguishable from hatred. "I am going to give you something now, a gift from my species to yours. It will hurt. It will show you everything you missed, everything you destroyed, but it will also show you that you do not have to be alone anymore." He pressed the cylinder against the sphere. The effect was instantaneous. 1,000,000,000 human lives flooded into the mad architect's consciousness. Births and deaths, first loves and final goodbyes, parents holding children for the first time, friends laughing together through tears, lovers growing old side by side. 100,000 years of humanity refusing to give up, refusing to stop loving, refusing to accept that connection was impossible even in the face of extinction. The mad architect screamed again, but this was different. Not rage, not hatred. Grief, that grief for everything it had destroyed, everything it could have had, everything it threw away in its madness. And then, slowly, impossibly, it began to change. The corrupted space-time started to heal. The absorbed civilizations began to separate, their essences finally freed after eons of imprisonment. The swarm of corrupted machines went still, then dissolved into harmless light. Outside, the battle stopped. Warriors of 10,000 species watched in awe as the mad architect transformed from a twisted horror into something beautiful, a geometric form of pure light, no longer mad, but finally, mercifully sane. The three architects floated together in the void. We united for the first time in 1,000,000 years. The one who remembers, the one who grieved, and hope, humanity's child, built from desperation and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Richard Kane drifted between them, exhausted but alive, sustained by energies beyond mortal understanding. A rescue shuttle from the Unity arrived to bring him home. "Is it over?" Primarch Elara asked when he was brought aboard, her empathic senses overwhelmed by the waves of emotion flowing through the fleet. "The war is over," Richard said. "What comes next is the beginning." In the months that followed, the galaxy transformed. The three architects worked together to repair the damage that their conflict had caused. Dead stars were reignited. Destroyed worlds were restored. The absorbed civilizations, freed from the mad architect's prison, were given new bodies and new homes. The Galactic Council was dissolved and rebuilt from the ground up, this time with humanity as equal partners rather than subjects. Species that had been enemies for millennia began the long, difficult process of learning to trust each other. Old hatreds faded as new connections formed. And humanity, after 100,000 years of hiding, finally stepped into the light. 1 year after the battle, the new Grand Assembly met for the first time in a chamber that floated among the three architects themselves. Representatives from every species in the galaxy gathered to mark the anniversary of their salvation. Ambassador Richard Kane rose to address them. He was older now, his hair fully gray, but his eyes still burned with the determination that had carried him through the darkest moments of the crisis. 1 year ago, humanity was judged by the old council and found wanting. We were sentenced to destruction. Instead, we destroyed your assumptions. We challenged your prejudices. We forced you to confront the darkness in your own history. He paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces, no longer hostile, but curious, respectful, hopeful. Today, I stand before you not as a conqueror or a victim. I stand as a partner, a fellow traveler on a journey that none of us can complete alone. He gestured toward the architects, vast and powerful beyond imagination, yet choosing to serve rather than rule. The stars remember. They remember our cruelty and our kindness, our wars and our moments of grace. Let us make certain that what they remember from this day forward is worthy of the light they give us. The chamber erupted in applause, a symphony of clicks and whistles and bioluminescent flashes from 1,000 different species. Later, on a quiet observation deck, Richard stood with Amara, watching the stars burn peacefully in the void. "Do you think it will last?" she asked. "The peace?" Richard smiled, thinking of everything his species had survived, everything they had built, everything they had sacrificed. Peace is not something that lasts on its own. It has to be chosen every day by everyone who wants it. But for the first time in 100,000 years, we have the chance to make that choice freely. He put his arm around her shoulders. That is all we ever wanted. The chance to be part of something larger than ourselves, without having to hide who we are. Below them, the three architects hummed with contentment, their ancient minds at peace for the first time in eons. Above them, the stars burned on, no longer weapons of destruction, but beacons of hope for a galaxy that had finally learned to look up at the sky without fear. Humanity had abandoned the Galactic Council. And in doing so, they had saved the galaxy itself. The stars would remember. They would remember everything. And for the first time in cosmic history, the memory would be one of healing, rather than hatred, of connection, rather than conflict, of hope. Eternal and unbreakable, burning bright against the endless dark.